They didn't say no. They just said later. Later felt reasonable, measured, responsible. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't fear. It was timing. The idea would appear quietly, a change, a move, a conversation that might shift something. Nothing reckless, nothing dramatic, just something different. And they would nod to it. Soon, they'd think, just not yet. There were practical reasons. Now wasn't ideal. Things were busy. Other priorities needed attention first. It made sense to wait until the conditions improved, until there was more certainty, more clarity, more proof that it would work. Later became a placeholder, a temporary shelf where important thoughts were stored. They weren't dismissed, they weren't abandoned, they were preserved, safely out of reach. Time moved without announcing itself. Weeks passed, then months. The idea would return occasionally, slightly quieter each time. Still present, still possible. Just postponed. There was comfort in postponement. Postponement didn't require courage. It didn't risk embarrassment. It didn't disrupt stability. It kept everything intact, and intact felt wise. Other people seemed decisive. They made changes abruptly. They relocated. They switched paths. It looked brave. It also looked exhausting. Waiting felt steadier. They told themselves they were being strategic. There's a right moment for everything, a moment when the numbers align, when the schedule clears, when confidence feels complete. That moment would arrive, eventually. But later is not a date. It doesn't appear on calendars. It doesn't send reminders. It stretches quietly, absorbing urgency as it expands. The idea began to adapt. It grew smaller, less ambitious, more practical, easier to manage. If it was going to happen, it would happen modestly, comfortably, without disruption. Years have a way of organizing themselves around inaction. Routines solidify, responsibilities deepen, options narrow not because they disappear, but because they are no longer prepared for. Muscles that aren't used don't stay ready. They still believed in the idea. They just believed in preparation more. Preparation felt productive. Research, planning, imagining. It created the feeling of progress without requiring movement. Occasionally, someone would ask about it. Weren't you going to? They would smile. Yes, at some point. And they meant it. At some point is flexible. It doesn't argue. There was no dramatic turning point, no sudden loss of opportunity, no door slamming shut, just a quiet shift in language. They stopped saying later. They started saying maybe. Maybe is softer, less committed. It prepares you for absence. Eventually, the idea stopped visiting altogether, not because it failed, but because it wasn't invited forward. Possibilities need participation. Without it, they remain theoretical. Looking back, there was no single decision that closed the path. Only a pattern, a series of reasonable delays, each one small enough to defend, each one logical on its own. Together, they formed an outcome. Nothing dramatic happened. Life continued, stable, functional, predictable. They had chosen wisely after all. There had been no unnecessary risks. But sometimes wisdom and avoidance look similar. Sometimes caution and comfort blur together. And sometimes the difference between a life expanded and a life contained is simply the word later. This isn't a story about failure. It's about timing, about how postponement can feel responsible while quietly reshaping possibility. Because later feels temporary, but when repeated often enough, it becomes permanent.